The Antebellum Era in the United States, a comprehensive exploration. Throughout America's history, African Americans have faced brutal violence and debilitating legislation that is usually a response to Black prosperity. This video will explore its political, social, and economic impact, and how it ultimately led to the Civil War. If you like the content we're providing, please consider clicking the join button. All your support helps us continue to take deep dives into Black culture and history. The Antebellum Era, spanning from the end of the War of 1812 to the start of the Civil War in 1861, was a period of profound transformation in American history. The Antebellum Era was marked by a significant expansion in agriculture, particularly in the southern states. The invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793 revolutionized the cotton industry, making the process of separating cotton fibers from seeds much more efficient. This innovation greatly increased the profitability of cotton production and led to a boom in the cotton economy. Southern planters expanded their plantations and sought new lands to cultivate, leading to the westward expansion of agriculture. Cotton quickly became the dominant crop in the South, earning the region the nickname King Cotton. The demand for cotton in both domestic and international markets fueled the growth of the Southern economy. By the mid-19th century, the United States was producing the majority of the world's cotton supply, which was in high demand by textile mills in Britain and the northern states. This economic dependency on cotton had profound social and political implications, particularly concerning the institution of slavery. The expansion of the cotton economy was inextricably linked to the growth of the plantation system and the entrenchment of slavery in the southern states. As cotton production increased, so did the demand for slave labor. Enslaved African Americans were forced to work on plantations under brutal conditions, providing the labor necessary to sustain the cotton economy. The profitability of slavery for Southern planters reinforced the social and economic structures of the South, generating a rigid class system based on race and economic status. The reliance on slavery had significant consequences for the Southern economy. While it generated immense wealth for plantation owners, it also created an economy that was highly dependent on a single crop and resistant to industrialization. The dependence on slavery and agriculture contributed to the economic and social isolation of the South from the rapidly industrializing North. In contrast to the agricultural South, the northern states experienced rapid industrialization during the Antebellum Era. The early 19th century saw the rise of factories, particularly in New England, where textile mills harnessed the power of rivers to operate machinery. The development of industries such as textiles, ironworks, and machinery production transformed the northern economy, making it more diverse and dynamic. The market revolution was a key component in northern economic growth. The period saw a shift from a subsistence economy to a market-oriented economy, where goods were produced for sale rather than for personal use. Improvements in transportation, such as the construction of the Erie Canal and the expansion of the railroad network, facilitated the movement of goods and people across the country. Innovations in communication, like the telegraph, further connected the expanding markets. The rise of a market economy in the North created new opportunities for entrepreneurs and workers, leading to the growth of cities and a burgeoning middle class. However, it also brought about social changes, including labor disputes and the rise of a working class consciousness. The economic divergence between the industrial North and the agrarian South set the stage for the political conflicts that would later erupt into the Civil War. The Antebellum Era saw the entrenchment of slavery as a foundational institution in the southern states. The expansion of the cotton economy and the resulting demand for labor led to the growth of the enslaved population. By the mid-19th century, there were nearly 4 million enslaved African Americans in the United States, the vast majority of whom lived in the South. The conditions of slavery were harsh and dehumanizing. Enslaved people were subjected to physical violence, family separations, and a lack of legal rights. They worked long hours in the fields, performing grueling labor under the supervision of overseers. Despite these oppressive conditions, enslaved African Americans developed rich cultural traditions and forms of resistance, including the creation of kinship networks, religious practices, and acts of defiance against their enslavers. In the North, the abolitionist movement gained momentum during the Antebellum Era. Abolitionists sought to end the institution of slavery and promote racial equality. The movement was diverse, including both Black and white activists, who used a variety of tactics to advocate for emancipation. Prominent figures in the abolitionist movement included Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman. William Lloyd Garrison, the editor of the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, called for the immediate and unconditional end of slavery. Abolitionists used a range of strategies to raise awareness and push for change. They organized lectures, published newspapers and pamphlets, and held public meetings. The abolitionist movement faced significant opposition, including violent attacks and legal restrictions, but it succeeded in bringing the issue of slavery to the forefront of national consciousness. The political landscape of the antebellum era was marked by growing sectional tensions between the North and the South, primarily over the issue of slavery. As new territories were acquired and states were admitted to the Union, the question of whether they would be free or slave states became increasingly contentious. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was an early attempt to address this issue. It allowed Missouri to enter the Union as a slave state and Maine as a free state, maintaining the balance between free and slave states in the Senate. The compromise also prohibited slavery in the Louisiana Territory north of the 3630 parallel. While it temporarily eased tensions, the Missouri Compromise was a stopgap measure that did not resolve the underlying conflict. As the United States continued to expand westward, the question of slavery in new territories remained a contentious issue. The Compromise of 1850 was another attempt to address sectional tensions. This complex package of legislation admitted California as a free state, allowed the territories of New Mexico and Utah to decide the issue of slavery through popular sovereignty, and included a stricter Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act required that escaped enslaved people be returned to their enslavers, even if they were found in free states. This law was highly controversial and galvanized abolitionist sentiment in the North. Many northern states passed personal liberty laws to counteract the Fugitive Slave Act, further heightening sectional tensions. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, introduced by Senator Stephen A. Douglas, allowed the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide the issue of slavery through popular sovereignty. This effectively repealed the Missouri Compromise's prohibition of slavery north of the previously agreed-upon parallel. This act led to violent conflicts between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers in Kansas, a period known as Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas highlighted the deep divisions within the country and the failure of legislative compromises to resolve the issue of slavery. The violence and political turmoil in Kansas further polarized the nation and demonstrated the potential for conflict to erupt over the issue of slavery. In 1857, the Supreme Court's decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford further inflamed sectional tensions. Dred Scott, an enslaved African American, had sued for his freedom on the grounds that he had lived in free territories. The court ruled that Scott was not a citizen and therefore had no standing to sue in federal court. Moreover, the court declared that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories, effectively nullifying the Missouri Compromise. The Dred Scott decision was met with outrage in the North and celebration in the South. It deepened the divisions between free and slave states and underscored the inability of the existing political system to resolve the issue of slavery. The Antebellum Era was also a period of significant immigration and urbanization. Millions of immigrants, particularly from Ireland and Germany, arrived in the United States during the mid-19th century. These immigrants sought economic opportunities and refuge from political and religious persecution in their home countries. The influx of immigrants contributed to the rapid growth of American cities. Urban centers like New York, Boston, and Chicago expanded dramatically, driven by industrialization and the need for labor. Immigrants often faced difficult living conditions, including overcrowded housing and poor sanitation, but they also formed vibrant communities and contributed to the cultural diversity of American society. Immigration also sparked nativist reactions, as some native-born Americans feared competition for jobs and cultural changes. The Know Nothing Party, a political movement characterized by its anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic stance, gained influence in the 1850s. Despite these challenges, immigrants played a crucial role in the economic and social development of the United States during the Antebellum Era. Want good luck for the next 5 years? Share this video with 5 people. The political landscape of the Antebellum Era saw the rise and fall of several political parties. The Republican Party, founded in 1854, was primarily composed of former Whigs, Free Soilers, and anti-slavery Democrats. The party opposed the expansion of slavery into the Western territories and promoted a platform of free labor, industrial development, and economic modernization. The rise of the Republican Party reflected the growing sectional divide in American politics. The election of 1860 was a turning point in American history. Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate, won the presidency on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery. His election was unacceptable to many Southern states, which saw it as a direct threat to their way of life and economic interests. Lincoln's victory led to the succession of several Southern states and the eventual outbreak of the Civil War. The Antebellum Era also witnessed the rise of popular culture and new forms of entertainment. Minstrel shows, which feature white performers in blackface, became a popular form of entertainment, reflecting and reinforcing racial stereotypes. While deeply problematic and offensive, Minstrel shows were a significant part of the cultural landscape of the time. Minstrel shows, a dark chapter in the annals of American entertainment, reveal much about the country's tortured soul and its pathological obsession with race. Emerging in the early 19th century, these spectacles of degradation laid bare the nation's deep-seated prejudices and its relentless drive to dehumanize the black body. Minstrel shows did not simply materialize from the ether. They were born of a society steeped in white supremacy. In the 1830s, as the specter of slavery loomed large, white performers began donning blackface, grotesquely exaggerating African American features and mannerisms. The infamous Jim Crow, concocted by Thomas Dartmouth "Daddy" Rice, set the stage for what would become a pernicious form of entertainment. The minstrel show was a carefully orchestrated ritual of humiliation, divided into three parts: the opening, the olio, and the afterpiece. The opening saw the performers, arrayed in a mocking semicircle, sang and danced, with the smug master of ceremonies flanked by Mr. Tambo and Mr. Bones, who embodied the coarse and the clownish. The second part, or the olio segment, paraded a variety of acts, from crude comedic skits to parodies, all steeped in the stench of racial denigration. The finale, or afterpiece, often set on an idyllic plantation, was a longer skit designed to perpetuate the myth of the contented slave, happy in his bondage. At the heart of these shows were vicious stereotypes that painted African Americans as lazy, ignorant, and buffoonish. The blackface white actors would portray black people as grotesque caricatures that sought to affirm the audience's sense of racial superiority. Minstrel shows were not a marginal phenomenon. They were a cultural juggernaut, seducing white audiences across the North and South. They embedded themselves in the American psyche, influencing vaudeville, musical theater, and even early cinema. The poisonous stereotypes they propagated lingered long after the last minstrel show ended. Minstrel shows are a stark reminder of America's racial pathology. They reveal a society that found pleasure in the degradation of black people, a society that constructed an entertainment empire on the foundations of bigotry and hatred. They are a mirror held up to the nation's soul, reflecting the ugly truths that it would rather forget. But it is in remembering and confronting these dark corners of our history that we begin to understand the depths of our wounds and the long road to healing. Consider becoming a member of our team. Just click the join button. All your support helps us continue to take deep dives into Black culture and history. The Antebellum Era was also a period of significant cultural development in American literature and art, led by figures like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. It emphasized individualism, self-reliance, and a connection with nature. Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, and Edgar Allan Poe were among the prominent authors of the period, contributing to a rich literary tradition that explored themes of morality, identity, and the human condition. Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in 1852, had a profound impact on public opinion about slavery, galvanizing anti-slavery sentiment in the North and provoking outrage in the South. The development of American music also took new forms during the Antebellum Era. Spirituals and folk songs created by enslaved African Americans expressed their experiences, hopes, and resistance. These musical traditions would later influence the development of blues, jazz, and other genres of American music. This era also saw a religious movement. The Second Great Awakening, a Protestant religious revival movement, swept through the United States during the Antebellum Era. The revival emphasized personal salvation, emotional religious experiences, and social reform. Camp meetings and revivalist preachers attracted large crowds, inspiring a wave of religious enthusiasm and moral reform. The revival played a crucial role in the abolitionist movement, as many religious leaders and laypeople viewed slavery as a moral evil that needed to be eradicated. The connection between religious revival and social reform underscored the moral and ethical dimensions of the antebellum debates over slavery and other social issues. The Second Great Awakening had a profound impact on American society, leading to the rise of various social reform movements. The temperance movement, which sought to reduce alcohol consumption, gained significant support. Education reform, led by figures like Horace Mann, aimed to establish public schools and improve educational opportunities for all children. The economic and social divisions between the North and the South were stark and growing during the Antebellum Era. The North's economy was characterized by industrialization, urbanization, and a more diverse labor force, including immigrants and free laborers. In contrast, the South remained predominantly agrarian, with an economy heavily dependent on slavery and the production of cotton. These economic differences were accompanied by distinct social structures and cultural values. The North's growing middle class, urban professionals, and industrial workers contrasted with the South's rigid class hierarchy, based on plantation agriculture and the institution of slavery. These divergent economic and social systems contributed to mutual misunderstandings and mistrust between the regions. The political landscape of the antebellum era was increasingly polarized by the issue of slavery. Legislative compromises, such as the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850, were temporary solutions that failed to address the deeper conflict over the expansion of slavery into new territories. The Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Dred Scott decision further exacerbated sectional tensions, as both sides saw their core interests and values threatened. The rise of the Republican Party, with its platform opposing the expansion of slavery, represented a direct challenge to Southern political power. The Democratic Party, which had traditionally drawn support from both northern and southern states, became increasingly divided along sectional lines. The collapse of the Whig Party and the fragmentation of the Democratic Party reflected the deepening political crisis. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final catalyst for the secession and the outbreak of the Civil War. Southern states viewed Lincoln's election as a direct threat to their way of life and economic interests. In response, several southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. The secession of southern states and the formation of Confederacy were driven by the belief that the federal government, under Lincoln's leadership, would seek to abolish slavery and undermine the Southern economy. The secession crisis highlighted the deep and irreconcilable divisions within the United States. The firing on Fort Sumter in April 1861 marked the beginning of the Civil War. The conflict that followed was the bloodiest in American history, with profound consequences for the nation. The Civil War ultimately resolved the issue of slavery, leading to its abolition with the passage of the 13th Amendment. However, the war also left a legacy of regional animosity and social upheaval that would continue to shape American history. The Antebellum Era was a period of significant transformation in the United States, characterized by economic growth, social change, political tension, and cultural development. The expansion of the cotton economy and the entrenchment of slavery in the South contrasted sharply with the industrialization and urbanization of the North. These economic and social differences created deep divisions that were exacerbated by political conflicts over the issue of slavery. The rise of the abolitionist movement, the struggle for women's rights, and the impact of immigration and urbanization reflected broader social changes and challenges. The cultural developments of the era, from literature and art to religious revival and popular culture, provided a rich tapestry of American life. Ultimately, the growing divisions between the North and the South, driven by conflicting economic interests and moral values, led to the secession of southern states and the outbreak of the Civil War. The Antebellum Era was a time of both great promise and profound conflict, setting the stage for the transformative events that would shape the future of the United States. Stay tuned for our next video as we break down the Jim Crow era.